Maya, a pragmatic engineering student at the city's renowned university, resided in a small, drafty apartment. The apartment was her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on her studies and escape the bustling city life. Its age was evident in the creaking floorboards and the faint scent of dampness that lingered despite her best efforts. The walls, adorned with peeling paint, whispered stories of the past, adding to the apartment's eerie charm.
I prefer logic and reason, finding solace in the concrete world of numbers and equations. The certainty of mathematical principles provided a stark contrast to the unpredictability of life. The supernatural? It's just mere superstition. I've always believed that everything has a logical explanation, a reason grounded in reality.
Her days were consumed by complex formulas and intricate diagrams. Each equation she solved brought her a step closer to her dream of becoming a renowned engineer. Evenings were dedicated to her textbooks, the warm glow of her desk lamp a comforting presence in the often chilly apartment. The lamp's light created a small bubble of warmth and security in the otherwise cold and drafty room. It was a routine life, predictable and safe, a stark contrast to the horrors that awaited her. Maya thrived on this predictability, finding comfort in her daily rituals. Little did she know, the sanctuary of her small apartment was about to be shattered. The very walls that provided her with a sense of security were hiding secrets that would soon come to light. An unseen entity lurked in the shadows, patiently observing, waiting for the opportune moment to make its presence known. The drafty corners of her apartment seemed to whisper warnings, but Maya, engrossed in her studies, paid them no heed. Maya, oblivious to the impending darkness, continued her studies, her mind immersed in the world of logic and reason. She was unaware that her life was on the brink of a terrifying change, one that would challenge her beliefs and force her to confront the unknown. As she scribbled down notes and solved equations, the shadows behind her flickered ominously, hinting at the presence that was growing stronger with each passing moment. The line between reality and the supernatural was about to blur in ways Maya could never have imagined. One evening, as she was deeply engrossed in her studies, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing her to look up from her books. The air felt different, charged with an energy she couldn't quite explain. It was the beginning of an encounter that would forever change her understanding of the world. Autumn had descended upon the city, draping the streets in a perpetual twilight. The air was crisp, and the leaves, now a mosaic of reds and golds, crunched underfoot. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable embrace of winter. The wind howled outside Maya's window, carrying with it the first whispers of winter's chill. It rattled the panes, a constant reminder of the changing seasons. Maya often found herself lost in thought, staring out at the swirling leaves, feeling a sense of melancholy that the autumn twilight brought. It was on one such evening, as the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across her room, that Maya noticed something peculiar. The familiar comfort of her home felt different, as if the shadows themselves were alive, watching her every move.
The shadows in my apartment, usually static and predictable, seemed to be moving. They danced and flickered in the dim light, creating shapes that were both fascinating and terrifying. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to communicate with me. They elongated and contracted, twisting and turning with an unnatural fluidity. It was as if they had a life of their own, defying the laws of physics and logic. The more I watched, the more I felt a growing sense of dread.
At first, she dismissed it as fatigue, her mind playing tricks on her after a long day of studying. The stress of exams and the lack of sleep were surely to blame. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing more than an overactive imagination. She rubbed her eyes, trying to focus on her textbook. But the unsettling movement in her peripheral vision persisted. No matter how hard she tried to concentrate, the shadows continued their eerie dance, refusing to be ignored.
"What is going on?" I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. The room felt colder, and the shadows seemed to grow darker, more menacing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Why do these shadows seem so alive? I wondered, my heart pounding in my chest. The logical part of my brain struggled to find an explanation, but deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong.
A shiver ran down her spine. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the leaves outside, seemed amplified, adding to her growing sense of unease. The logical part of her brain struggled to rationalize the strange phenomenon. She considered every possible explanation, from drafts to faulty lighting, but none of them seemed to fit. The shadows moved with a purpose, a malevolent intent that defied reason. Yet, deep down, a primal fear began to stir. It was an ancient, instinctual terror, the kind that warned of predators lurking in the dark. Her heart raced, and her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of the impossible. It whispered of unseen dangers lurking in the darkness, of things that defied explanation. The shadows seemed to mock her, their movements growing more erratic and sinister. She knew she had to find out what was causing this, but the thought of confronting the unknown filled her with dread. Days morphed into nights, each one colder and more unsettling than the last. The strange behavior of the shadows intensified, their movements becoming more deliberate, more menacing. It was as if something was toying with her, testing the boundaries of her perception.
I can't shake off this feeling. It's like something is watching me.
One evening, while making her way to the bathroom, Maya froze. A tall, shadowy figure stood at the end of the hallway. Its edges were blurred, indistinct, yet its presence was undeniable. It exuded an aura of malice, of cold, calculating evil.
This can't be real, it simply can't be.
Terror gripped her heart, squeezing the air from her lungs. Her mind, so accustomed to logic and reason, struggled to comprehend the impossible. But as she stared at the shadowy apparition, a terrifying truth settled upon her. She was not alone. Desperate for a rational explanation, Maya tried to convince herself it was a hallucination, a trick of the light. She would stand for hours, staring at the shadows, trying to catch them in the act of moving, hoping to see something that would make sense.
I even resorted to measuring the shadows, meticulously noting down every detail, calculating their angles and dimensions, comparing them to the known laws of physics, hoping to find a logical explanation for their bizarre behavior. I filled notebooks with my observations, but nothing added up.
But the fear remained, a constant knot in her stomach. It was as if the shadows were mocking her efforts, growing more erratic the harder she tried to understand them. Sleep became a distant memory. Every night, she lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of the shadows, her body tense with dread. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, every rustle of curtains sent her heart racing. She felt like a prisoner in her own home, constantly on edge.
I started seeing the shadowy figure everywhere, in the reflection of my window, in the corners of my vision, in the flickering flames of my stove, even in the patterns of the wallpaper, even in the steam rising from my coffee. It was as if the figure was taunting me, reminding me that it was always there.
Her once organized life was spiraling into chaos. Papers and belongings were strewn everywhere, a testament to her frantic search for answers. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving her teetering on the precipice of madness. She could no longer tell what was real and what was a figment of her imagination. The Shadow Man, as she had begun to call it, was slowly chipping away at her sanity, its presence a constant suffocating weight on her chest. She felt its eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to break. One night, driven to the brink by terror and exhaustion, Maya decided to confront the entity. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a surge of desperate courage, she stood in the center of her living room, its weak light barely penetrating the oppressive darkness.
Who are you? What do you want?
Silence met her question. A heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to amplify the pounding in her chest. The shadows in the room writhed and pulsed, as if alive, but the figure remained hidden. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. It felt like the calm before a storm, an eerie stillness pregnant with unseen danger. Maya stood frozen, her finger on the flashlight switch, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird.